All right, good morning. Thanks for being here today. My name is Matt Sitter. I'm CEO of AFN. AFN, our main driver is thinking that change is where opportunity happens. The best way to find opportunity in change is a network that is diverse in experience, expertise, and perspective. And so when we do events, we bring in people who have tremendous experiences and perspectives to be able to help us learn about some other part of their journey or their career. Today, we're going to be talking about the entrepreneur's journey. We got a few great people with us today. Speer, who's a friend of mine who's been on with us a number of times before. She's a managing director at Westwood, Wilshire, executive search firm, and primarily focused on the tech and biotech area, but has done a great job in searches that I have seen before as well. So, Chris, good to have you here.
Good morning.
And then we've got Tomer and Harish as well. So, Tomer was CEO and founder of Simply, which is now part of Flywire. And so congrats on having a successful exit. That is part of the discussion that we want to be able to have around this. And then we also have Harish here, who is founder and CEO of Entropy Labs, which is now part of Support Logic. And so we'll be talking about the whole customer, or rather the whole CEO journey here, from idea all the way through to exit. And Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you to start our questions rolling. And actually, maybe one more thing as I want to make sure that everyone knows here. In the first half of this, we're going to ask everyone to be off screen. If you've got questions or things like that that come up, throw them into the chat. We'll be monitoring that. In the second half, at about 35 after, we'll invite you all to come on the screen, and I will let you know when that happens. Thanks. All right. Now for real. Over to you, Chris.
Okay. Well, one of the reasons that these particular CEOs are pretty special is that they've done the entire journey. They were the founders that had the idea, that rode the whole process from beginning to end. And that is rare. Usually a board will replace a CEO along the way, or something will happen where the CEO steps aside and someone else will continue to grow the company and have it exit. So this is a very interesting conversation. And in preparing for the talk, we decided we'd tackle it in kind of three different phases. There's the idea phase, where the founder has the idea, gets started, and gets up and running, but there's a lot that happens during that time. The second phase, the growth phase, where, okay, you've settled into the groove and what you're doing with your company and growing it successfully. And then finally, the exit phase, where at some point there's, the founder, CEO makes the decision, okay, we're going to be positioning the company for sale or IPO. In this case, both companies were acquired, but they have very different kinds of businesses. But the journey that each of these gentlemen had to make is the same, soup to nuts. So this is why it's going to be an interesting conversation. And we'd like to start off with the idea phase, which is where the original idea came from. Did they need to pivot? Things like that. How did they get funding? So I'm going to turn it over, let's see, to Tomer. Why don't you kick us off and tell us more about the idea phase for Simply?
Thanks, Chris. And thank you, Matt, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to build some equity of karma as an entrepreneur, especially as I'm starting another journey soon. So you're asking a great question about the beginning. It's always extremely hard. It's kind of the riskiest phase. You really don't have anything to show for, and you're trying to get an opportunity. For me, I basically got the entrepreneurship bug from my journey at shopping.com, where I wasn't one of the founders. I was in the core team. And really, I've learned the ropes of what entrepreneurship is and really got hooked up to it and wanted to do it myself. And at first, when I started investing time in ideation, I was kind of looking into different ideas in the space that I knew, e-commerce, and really didn't come up with anything significant. And around the same time, I was going to this dreamy vacation in Mexico with my family, my in-laws that I loved, that could take care of the kids, friends. And it was a nightmare. Everyone got sick. We were just trying to get back home safely. And like 3-4 weeks later, I started getting kinds of papers with medical bills. And there was kind of the moment it hit me. This is really broken and somebody needs to go and fix it. I've never thought I'll do anything in healthcare. And I think in the most simplified way, You can think about entrepreneurs that have a certain expertise and they want to double down on that. And there are others that just tackle a pain point that they kind of experience themselves. And I guess I was on that front. And to your other question, Chris, regarding whether there's been any kind of changes from your original idea. And I think, generally speaking, it's hardly ever something that you have a plan and you just execute on it flawlessly and it's perfect. Usually there are changes or pivots, as we call them. And for us, we started, basically, we had, you can argue, like two different pivots. The first is we started as a direct-to-consumer. We built a mint.com for healthcare expenses, kind of a cool dashboard for consumers to see all their medical bills, and patients loved it. But the reality is we noticed very early that we're not going to scale. It's extremely hard to get people to sign up because really you care about medical bills when you have a medical bill. So we kind of changed the model and took that great start, that asset, that platform that we've built and application, and then we started offering that to hospital system, HSA banks, employers, and really got going with a B2B2C. So that was the first kind of change that we've made, and quite honestly, it was pretty easy. The kind of the data was there. The second one was a little bit more tricky because it's a little bit counterintuitive. We've kind of had, I would say, 2 of the top 5 HSA banks in the United States as our clients. They were paying us. But we kind of knew that the value is a little bit fluffy. There's no kind of tangible return of investment that we give them. We just make the experience for their members better. And at the same time, we strike gold with our first hospital system that kind of gave us a chance. And in startups where there's a notion of pull and push, and I felt like we're kind of pushing on the employer and HSA side where it's hard to get a lot of members in, even though we're getting paid. And on the provider side, we started like facilitating payments, and they came quickly and they came in a self-service fashion. And hospitals started making more money. It was easy for us to kind of realize that there's something there and there's a tangible ROI. And I remember we came to an end of the year strategy and planning session where my starting point was, okay, if we want to be protecting our risk and be smart, we should invest a lot in this new exciting area, but we're going to continue to do a little bit for the legacy because that's less risky. And we ended up, after 2 hours of debates, realizing that actually the less risky option is to put all of our focus, all of our resources on the place that we thought makes sense. And I think that was a very pivotal moment for us as a company. When you think about your risk, sometimes less risk is actually putting all your eggs in one basket, all your attention, and making a hard choice. And the reason we've made it is we all kind of said, if we would be from the outside looking in, giving advice to this management team, right, what would we tell them when we look at the 2 options? And everyone said exactly the same thing. We said, okay, the only reason it's hard for us is because we're in it and we have that. And that was kind of a very important moment. And I'm thinking that many other entrepreneur CEOs kind of experienced the same type of dilemma, let's put it this way.
That's fascinating, and would love to pick up on that, but I want to pivot over to Harish. Tell us more about when your company was started, how you got over that initial hump, and did it change from what you originally thought?
Yeah, absolutely. So not as storied as Tomer's history there, but I'm a late age entrepreneur. So I started almost in my late 30s when it's not as sexy, I guess. But I got in because I was very fascinated with AI, applied AI in the enterprise. All of my career has been in enterprise applications where we deal with tons of data. It is obvious that more and more unstructured data was coming into each business. So we want to kind of see where AI is, what can we do with it. And this was like back in 2015, right? We kind of hacked around, did a few projects, but I wasn't in this whole startup phase or trying to raise money. None of that. It was more like a pet project to see how far we can take this, where AI really is, what can we really do with NLP and machine learning models and stuff like that. But eventually around late 2018 or something is when we really launched. The idea did change, because the initial idea was there's so much unstructured data. Why don't we build some tech to process that and to figure out kind of like a culture IQ of a company. We're trying to build something that goes against Glassdoor, more in the sense from an inside out angle than the outside in angle that Glassdoor has. So that was the initial idea. We raised some money, we went after the problem, but it was too complicated. Clearly, as a first-time entrepreneur, you imagine things that are probably not as realistic, not as practical. So then we had to make a pivot, and we did make a pivot, ended up at the idea of Entrepreneurial Labs, which was about customer support, analytics, again, from a different angle, but this definitely had more traction. So that's how we started and how we made a pivot.
Okay. What else did you guys find interesting or really significant about the idea phase? If you were advising another entrepreneur about that, what were, like, for instance, what was the hardest thing to do other than pivoting your strategy, but what other factors were really difficult? And I'm thinking about early team, early funding, getting through that first phase into growth.
I would say two things. The first, it's super early when you're even thinking about ideas. I got the advice, and I ignored it, to talk to as many people, because the risk of somebody stealing the idea is very slim versus the opportunity to learn a lot. So I spent 2 months kind of baking some idea. Then I went to a mentor in my network, and in 5 minutes he shut it down, and I felt very bad. Like I just wasted a lot of time with kind of not talking. And if you talk to people, to experts, you're going to get so much more, and it will help you kind of avoid mistakes and kind of focus more clearly. It can be advisors, mentors, investors, experts in the field that you're trying to go after. So that would be the first. Like, don't worry about.
Don't be so paranoid about that. Okay,
it's crazy. It's crazy to do it anyway. Not a lot of people. It's not a rational decision to be an entrepreneur. Let's put it this way. And the second is just I can tell you about myself. It took us 3 rounds to get to $1.8 million of seed money. So it wasn't easy, and it happened in like 3 phases. And I remember that as much as it was hard, I was very encouraged, because I felt like I'm in the right place, because you have to have a lot of perseverance and belief in what you do and what you're going after, because you're going to hear so many doubts. It's easy to put holes and talk about risk with any idea, the smartest or the stupidest. It doesn't matter. It's the beginning. There's tons that needs to happen. That's why it doesn't happen a lot. So you have to really have a strong belief in perseverance to kind of go over the hump and not doubt yourself too much and push forward. And by the way, that you asked about employees, that doubt is not just coming from investors. It can come from people you're trying to pitch to join you.
Right.
It can come from anyone, because an employee who goes to an early stage company, he's taking a huge risk. A huge risk. So you just need to have that strong belief and to know that. I always go back to the story about Steve Jobs, not Steve Jobs, Amazon story at the beginning. Right. They were begging for $5 million and had 50 meetings until they got that first thing going on. It takes time to kind of get that first breakthrough, and you just need to power through that.
Wow. What about you, Harish? Did it come easier than that, or was it?
I think the idea phase, I mean, it may be a little cliche, but I think it's important. And I'll going back, just adding on to Tomer's point before I jump to my point.
Yeah.
At the early stage, everybody's an investor in your company. It's not just the guys who are writing the checks, right? The early employees who kind of believe in your mission, who want to go with you.
Right.
Your early customers, they're taking a big bet. Right? They're probably putting their neck on the line and trying to try your product out. Your family, right? Everybody's an investor. I mean, that's a lesson I learned over a period of time, that as you talk to people around you and as you go through the startup journey, it's not just the guys who are writing the check. Everyone who's engaging with you is kind of investing in you. So it just makes you that much more responsible, right? So you cannot fool around with, it's not just about fooling around with people's money. It's about people's, belief in you, people's time that they're giving to you. So you got to be very, very responsible. So anyone who wants to become an entrepreneur, that's the first thing. I see a lot of people who want to part-time it, hack around, and there's all kinds of advice. My angle is, if you want to be an entrepreneur, it's a serious game, right? A lot of people are investing their time and money with you and their belief. So you got to be really serious. But going back to the idea phase, what you really need is initially, could be cliched, but it's about passion. A lot of things go wrong. Everything goes wrong on a daily basis. Probably 9 things go wrong and 1 thing goes right. So if you're not in love with the problem, not the solution, right? Solutions can change, but you got to be in love with the problem. And if you're not, then don't get into the game, because everything just goes wrong for at least 2-3 years. And people who are just, kind of thinking it's a fad and they want to get in, you will get burnt out very, very quickly, right? So you got to really, really love the problem you're trying to go after. Solutions will change. In my case, at least for me, I was a people's manager for a long time, and I wanted to use unstructured data inside a company to help teams get better. That was a problem. The way I went about it initially was wrong. Then we figured out a small functional group to go after, so that kind of worked. But the problem was, there's so much data lying around. Why don't we use that to help teams just get better, right? So you got to love the problem. Then the other thing we got lucky is that you got to be really in a massive market, right? Again, you cannot be in a super duper niche market. A lot of people say things will just evolve. Maybe in the consumer space, they evolve, but I'm an enterprise guy. In enterprise play, if you're going after an idea, first thing is you got to love the problem. The solutions will change, and it has to be a massive market. Otherwise, there's no point playing there.
Wow. I love the fact you have to be, the passion is for the problem and the solution might change. I think that's a really good way of putting it. Okay. Well, let's move on to the growth phase. So you somehow, stayed alive and you've gotten a little bit of funding to grow. And now I would love to hear what were the most challenging parts of this phase, growing the business. Investors have now expectations of you, and you have to manage everything in the company as the CEO. So I'm interested both in your personal journeys and the professional evolution of yourselves in the CEO role, as well as what you did with your business and your team. So Harish, why don't you start us off on this time?
Yeah. The main thing as you start growing is hiring, right? Initially, you're basically doing everything. Then you want to start delegating it out. It's a really, really tough thing to delegate, because not everybody thinks like you do. You always have to give them the benefit of doubt. You got to have the patience for people to grow into that job. Those are really hard as an entrepreneur, because you just want to move fast, right? So the only thing that can kill an early stage startup is not being fast enough. You got to move fast, right? So the kind of people you hire, sometimes you make mistakes, and I made mistakes. Not everybody fits with your personality or your style. Early stage, no matter what people say, it is not a democracy. It is a dictatorship. It is a founder's vision. If you have 2 founders, then it's between the both of them, or 3 founders. It's the founder's vision. The company's culture effectively becomes what the founder is like. So as you hire people, you got to be very, very careful in the kind of people you're hiring, such that you're able to gel with them. They could be great people. They could be even better than you, right? But if you can't gel with them, it just won't work. So the hiring is very, very hard. Getting it right is hard. And given that you have a limited budget, you're really selling your vision, your mission. That's tricky, but that's the only way you can grow, right? So you're your biggest blocker when you're a founder CEO, because so much has to be done and you cannot do it. And you got to bring people and trust them to do it. So getting that wrong will burn you. And I got burned. But then getting it right really, really pays off. I think that is what I think is very, very critical for growing phase.
Okay, Tomer.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I told somebody like a couple of weeks ago that's starting to get traction, and she was complaining like it's getting crazier. And I told her that's actually how it's supposed to be. When you're actually succeeding in a startup environment, it's just going to get worse. It's just going to get more work, more stress. If it's not like that, it's probably still in the mud. So the growth phase is really challenging. There's a lot of kind of pain in that. Completely agree with the point about talent, because at the beginning, maybe you've got those 10x employees, those super ninjas that they can just do everything. They're very versatile, and it's easier to build when you're kind of in a 10, 15 people operation. Now you start to scale, and you need to add more people, and you need to add more functions. How do you kind of maintain that same level of talent? And I have to say, as much as I knew that before I came in, that, you know, a good idea, strategy, that's like 2% of your way to success. It's everything else is just about people and execution. Yeah. I had similar scars with kind of bringing the wrong people. Because it's hard to find the right people that can carry the weight, and just like Harish said, if you bring them, they give you scale, they allow you to really grow, because they can do the same thing on their own. And the advice there, by the way, because you're not going to avoid making mistakes, it's just impossible. I mean, you know that, Chris, as a hiring executive, what you can do is you got to quickly assess and figure out. I would argue it doesn't take too long to figure out if someone is a good hire or not. And if you made a mistake, you just need to kind of fix that as soon as possible. Yeah, that's one. The other thing that I would add, with regards to execution, when you scale, usually it comes after you had a couple of good wins. You kind of have a product market fit. Now you're starting to add a lot more customers. And either they've got versatile asks. It's not necessarily that what you've built is going to fit everybody. So you got to make sure that you get as much as you can real feedback from those customers and those new customers that are coming, so you can kind of understand as quickly as possible what do you need to build to make it robust. Because at the beginning, it's like, you have the vision, you build something based on the dots that you connected. Now you've got customers. That's like, learn from them, understand what they need. It will kind of save you time and money. And the other part that it's a little bit counterintuitive, you can also get a lot of requests for things that you need to be very disciplined about not going into. Not anyone would say, hey, can you build that for me? Because he trusts you, you're doing a great thing. But if he's asking for something that is going away from the core DNA of the company and what they're doing, or it's now a little bit more customized, yeah, you may get paid for that, but it's going to hunt you later on, because now your platform is going to start to become more complex, and there's going to be more maintenance and legacy. So you have to really be disciplined about knowing what do you need to do in order to really scale and grow the company long term, not just short term, and kind of have that balance.
I have one question for you guys. Yeah. So, we've been talking largely about how we think about the business and how we're focusing on that. But we have bled into the fact that it's a pretty taxing endeavor that you're involved in, and keeping your own personal resilience at a certain level to make sure that you can continue to execute, that you're on the right path, can be something hard. I'm just wondering what you guys did to be able to maintain that resilience in yourself. How did you make sure that you were able to continue on that journey? And if you got any tips for anyone on things that they ought to be thinking about. And Tomer, maybe if you could start, and then we'll go to Harish.
Yeah, it's It's a good question, and CEOs in particular, I think they're kind of a little bit in a lonely situation because you basically report to everyone, not everyone reporting to you. You need to answer questions from your employees, from your customers, from the market, from analysts, from your investors, from your management team, and also there's always crises, there's always ups and downs, and everyone's looking at you to lift them up, right? You kind of need to be the one that brings that passion, that positive attitude. So it's definitely very hard. I would say that you need to find kind of ways to discharge. You need to find ways to get your energy back, right? For me, for example, I felt like when I came back home and I had like 3 little kids running towards me, I kind of shut things off for a little bit and got some perspective and could let my mind and the stress kind of ease down. So that kind of gave me energy. Doing sports was kind of another thing. I'm usually doing that in the morning. That's another kind of thing that I think is very sustainable. It gives you kind of good energy. So those are the 2 things that I've done, but I wholeheartedly understand the question because I think that's definitely a challenge, especially startups. It's a journey. It's not like 1, 2, 3 years, and it's growing, it's compounding, and you have to kind of recognize that and figure out how to deal with that.
Yeah, if you're constantly sprinting, it's going to hurt real bad. It's a marathon, so you got to take some breaks here and there. Harish, what about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with Tomer. I mean, it's very lonely. Even your early employees, your co-founders, anyone, there are things that you just cannot share. You cannot talk. You don't want to bring that stress home. Like sometimes you have really, really supportive spouses, but there are things that you don't want to share because people don't have the full context. But yeah, if you can, you should have kids. They are the biggest stress buster. It really makes a big difference. At least for me, it did a lot. Same thing with keeping yourself busy with some other stuff. I'm a chess player, so I used to do this speed chess stuff that really helped me kind of relieve some of my stress. But bigger than any of this, I think, is having a good friends / other CEOs, other founders in your network, right? I tried to start something like that. We had like 3 or 4 that we would try to meet. I mean, it didn't really work out. we didn't plan it out, but it actually makes a huge difference. The only people who can really get you is another founder, right? And who's also going through a similar journey. Ideally, who is 1 stage ahead of you, because they've already seen this crap. They know what works, what doesn't work, what should you stress about, what should you not stress about. So if you can find somebody like 1 stage ahead of you, another founder, if you're able to somehow make friends with them, ideally if it's a good friend of yours, that's the best deal because you can really go vent it out. I think those are the only ways, because there are things that you cannot talk to anybody. It's really hard sometimes.
I have a question for you guys. Was there any point in your journey that, or did you, and when you started the company even, did you think I don't intend to be the CEO, but you ended up being the CEO? I mean, was there any point in which you thought, you know what, I don't know if I'm the right person for the job anymore. Maybe somebody else, should be CEO. Did that ever occur to you or not? I don't know.
I can quickly go over it. I mean, I exited before I got to a really big growth phase, but I was practical about it. I mean, I was like, if there is somebody who can probably do a better job than me in growing the company, I should be open to that. I was always open to that. But it didn't go that far. But I think if it's good to be open to that, but it's also hard to trust anybody who can do a better job. It will have to be somebody who is like really, really good, or it's forced on you by the investors. Either didn't happen, but I think that is something you have to be open to.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I kind of knew from the beginning when I started that that's kind of something that I feel like I should be doing. I kind of had the passion to be at the helm. So I was kind of planning on doing that, but you have to be realistic that at the end of the day, it's a result-oriented business, and I'm not naive. I think if the company would not do well, the board has limited options in terms of what to change, and obviously,
right,
the CEO is kind of a classic one.
right.
So I was just focused on kind of doing the right things, and knew that if we'll do well, the journey will continue. I felt good about that. I felt like I'm kind of in the right spot. So I did not really have a lot of dilemmas on that front. And I also want to just comment on what Harish mentioned before, because on the stress part, I did not do a great job with connecting with other CEOs. Sometimes when you kind of heads down, you focus, excuse me, you kind of very laser focused on your kind of your crazy journey. So I wish I've done a little bit more of that. I think for me, one of my co-founders was also kind of a friend. So I felt like I had some of that internally, but I agree that if you've got somebody that you can kind of bounce down those challenges with and talk about them, I think that's a very healthy thing.
I had a question about that. Did you form like an informal or formal advisory board, or did you just have people in your network that you turned to?
I mean, we've added to our board a CFO of a large health system in the United States. So we kind of had a really great voice of the customers in our board. And he would always, when we were having our board meetings, bring kind of that market perspective, that client's perspective. And other than that, I nothing formal, but throughout the journey, and my journey was 10 years, I've kind of built great relationship and even friendship with a lot of kind of senior people at different clients. So it wasn't like anything formal, but I spent a lot of time with these guys, and they formed a lot of the thoughts that we had about where we need to go and what we need to do.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I had a couple of advisors, but it was mostly tactical, just trying to people in my network who were willing to help and who already been through this journey, who kind of founded multiple companies, exited and all that. It was tactical. They would help. Clearly, they have a time constraint. They are not friends, but definitely advisors who had some tactical advice.
Okay, so let's pivot now to the exit phase. You've grown your company, and at some point, I'd love to know when or how you made the decision to start, steering towards an exit, and how did that exit come about? And would love to know, if people are watching who are CEOs and they're thinking, well, how do I know when it's time to think about that? And how much in advance do I have to think about that? Those are some things that occurred to me, but maybe there's some other perspectives you want to put in here. So Tomer, tee us up on the Simply exit.
Yeah, that's such an important question, because as a CEO and founder, this is like your baby. And I just talked about how passionate and kind of a big believer you need to be, but you can't be blind, and you have to also be able to look realistically into what you have and what the potential is. And in our case, we've had kind of a big EMR company that had kind of a one-stop shop solution, and they were giving us the business. And despite of the fact that we drove great ROI, we've kind of had some painful attrition. And I've kind of realized that this is a limiting factor for us. And I remember after 8 years, at first I kind of debate that with myself. Then I talked about it with my co-founders and my management team to kind of form a point of view. And I think then I went to the board and I said, look, this is the situation. Realistically, it's a great business, but we believe that we're at a point that the opportunity is somewhat limited, and the risks are something to take into account. And maybe this is a good time to start thinking about how we join forces with somebody else to have a better chance to kind of fulfill that vision. So I had to kind of break the news and talk to them about that. And obviously I gave them kind of connected the dots, gave them kind of good information about that. And then we said, but we want to do it smartly. And what I mean by that is you don't want to kind of put yourself in a place where potential buyers see that you're kind of eager to sell. And you're kind of not in a position of strength. So for us, what we've kind of recommended to the board, and the board completely backed us on that, we said, we believe that in the next couple of years, we can continue to grow aggressively, but we're also going to make the steps to get to profitability. Because I don't want somebody to, when he starts looking into our company, he's going to say, oh, these guys, they're about to run out of money. They potentially are looking to sell the company. We have kind of a leverage on them. And it was hard, it was painful, but we were able to, the last year we delivered 40% year-over-year growth, and we were a pretty big business already, and got to profitability. And when we've had conversations with potential buyers, they kind of saw that, and that was kind of my position. I said, look, we're being opportunistic. We believe there's a big future. But we're not in a rush. And I think that kind of set us up really well in those type of conversations. And I can bring it back to today's world. There's a lot of conversations about the hype that happened like 2 years ago, and the fact that there's a lot of painful down rounds and IPOs that crashed. And I say, like, that's a great example of what I meant right now about be realistic about who you are. You can't convince yourself that your company is worth 2x overnight just because the market is hot. That's not a sustainable way to look at it, because surprise, surprise, a year after, everyone goes back to reality. And now you need to deal with the consequences of kind of being tempted to do it. So it's not like I'm going to take as much money as I can at the craziest valuation. I don't think that's smart business. Be realistic about where you're going and kind of navigate that in that fashion. And then I think even if you're not a unicorn, and we were not a unicorn, we still got to a really great outcome for everyone involved.
Harish, how did you get your feet up?
Yeah, in our case, it was multiple factors, I think. So we were at a spot where we had to raise money. This was almost exactly a year back, and I had moved from Boston to the Bay Area. The idea was to raise money, keep growing faster. At the same time, this whole GPT thing was on the anvil. There are a lot of debates around, okay, when is this thing really going to take off? There's early promise, and we were debating. And we are an AI company, so we had built our own native AI models with proprietary data set and all this stuff. So we had done almost 2 years worth of work building that tech. And that was a real differentiation, right? Advantage. But we were also in a very crowded market. We were in this customer support, intelligence, system of intelligence play, where we were looking at on the agent side, on the customer support agent side, voice of the agent, and trying to analyze that. But there's a lot of players who are on the voice of the customer side. So the way for us to grow and kind of make a really big company would be that we'll have to expand to that voice of customer play as well. So there are a lot of these strategic decisions which have to be made. Then we have to raise money to be able to go after that play, which is when we were like, okay, which way do we go now? It is a crowded market, but we had good tech, but tech which could also probably be disrupted in the next 1-2 years. So we had all these considerations, and I had just landed in Bay Area. It turned out that we had an incoming acquisition interest. It was a pretty late stage company, very strong. I was like, that was kind of surprising and interesting. This is probably also what I would put up to Bay Area magic. Anyone who wants to do a serious tech startup, I think you should be in the Valley. Otherwise, it makes a difference. It came in. Then we
so you weren't looking for this. You just got
no. We were at a crossroads. Wow. We were trying to figure out, okay, what do we do now? Go after a big raise, or does it even make sense? What do we do? What else can we do now? Stay in the steady state? How do we handle this? And then this came in. So I said, okay, fine, maybe we should figure out a way to exit to some complementary business. Then from one, it turned to four. There are four companies who are interested. And then we started talking, and it worked out with Support Logic. There's a bunch of reasons why we went with them, but it was complementary. There's a lot of culture fit. And we're like, yeah, this is probably a good way to exit. And we did that.
Wow. So I have a very naive question. Once you had the initial inbound acquisition, inquiry, how did other companies pile onto that? How did they know that this was a potential deal? How did you get the multiple bidders?
No, they did not. I did. I spread the word. So because once you have interest and you want to see if this is serious or if it's just a flash in the pan, or if the incoming interest is just people trying to learn the market, there's a variety of reasons, right? So then I spread the word saying, okay, maybe is there something real to this? And there was a lot of interest. So which was like, okay, fine, maybe it makes sense.
How exposed were you to the company that bought you prior to getting into a conversation with them? Had you already known folks that were there, or was it just like, hey, got this incoming offer, and then you start building a relationship?
No, I knew of the company. They existed. One of their investors had reached out to me a year or so back. So they were interested in our company because they saw it as a complementary thing. It didn't work out at that time, but I knew about the company. I knew they had this angle. They were doing a great job, phenomenal logos. And then once again, in the Valley, a common friend made the intro. And I did not know the CEO or the founder. A common friend made the intro. Then we started talking, and things worked from there.
Okay, so you always got to borrow the credibility of someone else out there. You having a trusted friend help you out was a good way to go.
Yeah.
Tomer, you were going to say something?
Yeah, for me, I met the CEO of the acquiring company like maybe 18 months before it actually happened. We kind of had an intro call, and I wasn't sure if it's the right time for us. And also we've basically, that company acquired a small startup, a competitor that was actually a veteran in the space. So basically I had a competitor that we had respect to each other, and he was kind of the champion. So I kind of had a couple of interactions, but for the most part, outside of like learning,
you didn't expect anything to come of that. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it is a bit risky when you kind of try to sell your baby to kind of figure out, how to get the not just the right outcome, but the right home for your employees and a place that can continue to grow that business that you've built. So it is tricky.
Okay. So I think if there's any questions from the audience or anything, we want to make sure that we have a couple of minutes for that. Anybody want to put a question in here?
And Chris and I can definitely come up with more questions.
Yeah, lots of time
right away. Go ahead, Hartmut.
Good morning, gentlemen. That's brilliant, your experience. Thanks so much for sharing it. I've got two questions. One may be very elementary, but there's a purpose, and that is I'm part of a venture mentoring team in South Florida, and we are trained on the Steve Blank Stanford-based dynamics about how to run a startup. And he always stresses, and you've probably heard it, get out of the office when you're a CEO starting your startup. How does that resonate to you in real life?
I completely agree with that. And it goes, you need to go and spend time with your early customers. You need to go to conferences and understand what's going on in the market. If you're a global company, even a small company can have offshore offices. You need to spend time with the employees, assess them, connect them, inspire them. So I wholeheartedly agree with that. That really, it's especially early stage. It's a lot about connecting all the dots, and the best way to assess a situation is to experience that as much as you can in real time, and not at the office getting the intel from somebody else.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you have to get out of the office. Ideally, you're talking to the customers, right? So
Exactly.
there's this whole conference thing. People invite you to conferences and you want to go. Often the ROI is not that great, but the only reason you want to go to a conference is if you know there's a bunch of potential prospects or customers there, and you can have this back-to-back discussions with them, and you're saving everybody's time, right? But being able to talk to, getting out of the office, talking to customers, or even talking to investors, potential hires, I think as a CEO, that's your number one job, and you got to be out there on your feet. And there's this, it also relates to a question we had earlier about stress. And what I experienced was that there was a lot of stress, uncertainty. You're like, okay, well, what do we do now? The only thing that really used to help me was a customer call, right? So get on this call with the customer, talk to them how they're using the product, what complaints do they have, what do they like about it. And as I start sharing, what do they like, what do they not like, and that, your old love for the problem and why you even started the company, that all comes back to you rapidly. And I used to find that was a big stress buster for me. And I used to try to make it a point to see, can I talk to a customer every week? Even if it's the same customer, but somebody different inside the company, because people have different perspectives. And the fact that they're using your product is already a nice validation. And it actually helps relieve some of the stress when you talk to your customers. I would strongly recommend talking to customers.
Excellent, thanks. And yeah, that subscribes or validates what Steve Blank advocates for. The second question is, have you had the experience once you had a successful startup and you got acquired, but the new owner wants you to stay on? And if so, how was that experience? No longer being possibly the majority owner and having to coexist with an acquirer, maybe hostile, maybe not, but in any way, you no longer are in charge. How did that go if you went through such an experience?
It's a great question, and I can tell you personally, I was terrified about that before we started, because you're right. You're kind of at the helm, you make all the decisions, you control your destiny. And the minute you sign it and there's a wire, now you work for somebody else and he's got control. I have to say that, my personal experience, and entrepreneurs, their brain is wired in a very optimistic / unrealistic way. Mm-hmm. And still, it exceeded all my expectation, because you're right. You have to stay for a couple of years. There's like basic shackles that are out there, hold back, earn out, things like that. We've had that. I stayed for a little bit more than 3 years. I stayed a little bit longer. Financially, the company that acquired us went public a year after. And while we had a cash deal, we did get stock option grants that turned out to be very valuable. So that was a reason to stick around. Also, the leadership of the company that acquired us, I think we're all really good people, and the culture was very similar. That's partly why they were kind of at the top of the list of the companies we were hoping to partner with. And the tricky part is you just need to accept that your role is changing a little bit, right? Because for me, in my example, that champion that I had, he was the GM of the business, and I became a little bit like a consultant for him. I kind of accepted the fact that he's the guy running the show. He's the guy making decisions. To some extent, after 10 years, I was tired, so I was okay with kind of loosening up on that front. And then I made the decision that I'm going to set the right example in terms of partnering with him. And we set the tone for the rest of the organization. So everyone saw that it's not like we're just in a fluffy way complementing each other, but we really built a good connection. And that set the tone for everyone else. And I can tell you, like 3 years after, we didn't lose any employee. Maybe one person left. And part of the credit is for the acquiring company, that they build a great culture. And the other is we really put a good effort to merge the two companies and the two teams. And I think if you do that, and if you come with the right approach, then that's what you can control to make it a pleasant experience.
Excellent. Great. Congratulations.
Harish, did you stay? Yeah.
It did definitely a shift in your mindset. I think you got to get used to that. Not easy. I'm still at the company. Our acquisition just happened like 8 months back, but we gel well. There are obviously some concerns here and there, but largely I agreed to the acquisition because I thought there was a culture fit in how this CEO sees the company and how I see the market. Also because the employees, we migrated all the employees over. I was hoping there'll be a culture fit, and it has been. It is definitely an adjustment that you don't call all the shots. You got to be prepared for that. And there's a trust factor here that whatever the shots are being called are good. I'm lucky in a way that I still run this line of business here inside the company because we had some overlap, but really it's very complementary. And we were acquired because this helps expand the TAM of the acquiring company. So I still run that line of business here. The team is still, the team is not exactly with me. They've been spread around all over the place, but I do have some independence in, calling some of the shots. So I think I'm fortunate from that perspective. It doesn't always look like this. Oftentimes, you become redundant very quickly. But once you decide to sell, you got to be prepared for any eventuality. And you got to trust that if they decided to buy, then they've put their head on the block with their board, with their money. So, you got to trust that they'll make the right call, even if you don't agree with it. So sometimes we do have, some debates. And the simple thing that we both kind of agree on is disagree and commit, right? Either way, whatever happens, the Jeff Bezos philosophy, disagree, but commit and move forward. That's pretty much what we do.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, it seems that you guys were both astute in choosing who you could acquire and have made that transition, let's say, successfully. So congrats. Thanks.
Thank you.
So just in summary, I was just wondering, as you look back at the whole journey, things you will take with you into the next endeavor, whatever you decide to do. Tomir, I think you're geared up to do one more startup. So I'd love to hear what you any tricks of the trade or anything that you are thinking about as you go into the next one.
Yeah, I thought about that question, and I don't think I have any real insight. I feel like I've got a realistic view about what it means to do it again, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and eventually, just like Harish mentioned, there's so many moving parts to it. You need to have luck and good timing to come with that. And you need to hope that you make good choices and you've got great talents next to you. So, I feel like I can follow the same playbook and kind of hope to be able to do the same. Obviously, things change rapidly in the tech environment, so you put a lot of efforts into like updating, tools, approaches, management styles, what have you. The workplace used to be at the workplace. Now more people working at home, but those to me are more tactical. I think at the core, I feel like I've kind of, if I'll follow the same type of conscience and beliefs, I think I give myself a good chance to be successful.
Great. Harish?
Yeah, I'm here with this company for a while. So right now I'm not really considering any other adventures. But there is interesting inbound that comes in. There's a couple of young startups. I'm advising them. It's nothing formal. Just trying to share whatever I've learned. If I can help somebody not make the mistakes I made, that is something that I try to help people with. There's a bunch of these students from a business school who were here, and I went and talked to a bunch of the students, all super driven about entrepreneurship and everything. I simply told them, if you're serious about tech startups, you got to be in the Valley. Many people didn't like the idea, but that's how things move here. If you can, you don't have to be, of course, but especially for first-time entrepreneurs who don't have a big network, this is a place. So stuff like that. Wherever I can help, I do help. But otherwise, I'm here for some time. And again, going back to Tomer's thing, yeah, a lot of things have to come together for a venture to kick off. You cannot, especially as second or third time, entrepreneurs, you're that much more circumspect, I would say, and that much more careful in what you want to do, because many things can go wrong. But one or two things that can really go right, you have to be 100% sure, and then you go after that.
Very nice. Okay. Well, I think we're pretty much at the end of our time. Matt, do you want to do a wrap up for us?
Yeah. So, as expected, time flew on this because we were talking about some great stuff. So thanks so much for sharing your hard-won wisdom, and congrats on getting to the exit. And huge pleasure to have you in front of our audience at AFN. So thanks, Tomer. Thanks, Harish. Thanks, Chris. And looking forward to potentially having another conversation with you guys coming soon in the future.
That'll be fun.
Thanks, Matt.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.